Okay, so good morning, everybody. Um, my name is Idri Dizon, and I will be your moderator for this morning's webinar. On behalf of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies, we welcome everyone to today's webinar on China's relationship with the Korean Peninsula. So before we begin our webinar, I would like to set a few ground rules. First, that we will be using the Zoom chat feature to accommodate all of your questions. And please take note that when doing so, please make sure to include your name and your affiliation when asking your questions. Okay, so I guess without further ado, um, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Korea Studies, ASEAN-Korea Relations, Filipinos in Korea, and Environmental Politics are the research interests of Michelle Rubido Palumbarit. She obtained her doctoral degree in political science from Yonsei University, Seoul in 2016, and her master's degree in Korean Studies in 2012 from the same university. Now, prior to her graduate studies in Korea, Professor Palumbarit studied at the Asian Center, UP-Diliman, with Korea as her country of specialization. She's currently an assistant professor at the Asian Center, University of the Philippines-Diliman, and is in charge of the Korea Studies program of the center. Aside from handling courses on Korea, she also teaches a class on environmental politics. And so, friends, let us all welcome Professor Michelle Palumbarit with a virtual round of applause. Professor Palumbarit, you may of course take the floor. Professor, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry for that. I'll share my screen again. Okay. Thank you, EJ, for the very generous introduction. As a Korea observer, if there is a metaphor that can describe relations between the two Koreas and China, I can think of the big brother to little brother as one of the Confucian human relations. And then big brother to little brother to equals. And who knows in the future, from big brother to little brother to equals to enemies or friends, that remains to be seen. So this is the idea where I got an inspiration from. So my presentation revolves around this idea. And so I gave my presentation the title From Big Brother to Little Brother to Equals, the two Korea's relations with China. I'll be discussing four important points here. One is the shared history between the two countries, the United Korea then, as two brothers embracing each other. And second is when the time when relations change dramatically, especially between South Korea and China. And how is it going from the end of the Cold War until contemporary times? And what does the future hold as part of my concluding points? Okay, um, basically, I would like to say that Korea was part of the tributary system of China, the so-called Sefin system. Tributary system is a set of highly regulated, ritualized exchanges that occurred between the imperial court in China's capital and leaders of the Asian societies. And for centuries, Korea paid tribute to Chinese empires. Okay, um, of course, China has many influences on Korea. It has influences on philosophical traditions, music, architecture, but prominent of which that I would like to point out is Confucianism. Um, Aside from sharing close trade and diplomatic relationship with China, Confucian influences penetrated Korean society in the realm of cultures and institutions. The picture on the right here is a picture of the young ones. You know, they were the social, political, and cultural elites of the Joseon dynasty, particularly who embodied Confucian ideals and philosophy. In terms of culture, interestingly, the white porcelain during the Chosun dynasty, the picture on the left, is an interest to me. White symbolizes purity in Confucianism. And the picture on the right also is an influence of China, the so-called imperial examination system, of the examination system, where Korean intellectuals or Korean elites, the young ones from all over the country gather and take this exam on Chinese classics and many other subjects. Okay, and also as for institution, I'm not saying Song Joong-ki is an influence of China to Korea, but what I would like to say is Songkyung-wan University also traces its roots in the 1300s during the Joseon dynasty. Okay, Songkyung-wan University in Seoul, and there's also one in Suwon. And by the way, if you go to Korea, Songkyung-wan University in Seoul is across the Catholic Church in Hawadong, where many Filipinos gather there, mostly on Sundays. And they call that place the Jagon Manila or the Little Manila because many Filipinos gather there on Sundays. Okay. So when did the relations really change dramatically and between the two Koreas and China? So one factor that led to the dramatic change in the relations between the two Koreas and China is the Korean War. The Korean War brought North Korea closer to China, while South Korea to the United States. The 1953 Korea Armistice Agreement officially divided the country into two. The North Korea became the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or the DPRK, and South Korea became the Republic of Korea, or the so-called Republic of Korea, or ROK. During the war, China provided help to North Korea. Around 3 million soldiers participated in the conflict. In the same manner, also, the United States supported South Korea. In fact, the Philippines also sent its soldiers. About 7,000 Filipino military personnel and soldiers were sent during this war. And perhaps many of you know, former President Fidel Ramos was one of them. Okay. So as for the number of military casualties during that time, South Korea incurred around 500 or half a million military casualties as compared to North Korea's around 700,000 and China around 200 to 300,000. As for civilian casualties during this time, South Korea incurred around 500 to 600,000, while North Korea around a million during this war. So in order to strengthen relations between China and North Korea, both countries signed the SINO-North Korean Mutual Aid and Cooperation Friendship Treaty in 1961. So under this treaty, China pledged to immediately render military and other assistance by all means to its ally against any outside attack. And Article 2 of the treaty declares that the two nations undertake all necessary measures to oppose any country or coalition of countries that might attack either nation. And this treaty was supposed to be extended in this year, 2021. And true enough, 3 days ago, on July 7, this China-DPRK Friendship Treaty was renewed. Wang, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China, says, to quote, the China-DPRK Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance will remain in effect all the time until China and North Korea reach an agreement to amend or terminate it according to the treaty's regulation. And he further adds, China's position on the Korean Peninsula issue is always clear. The issue of the Korean Peninsula is at China's doorstep. China will continue to play a constructive role until lasting peace and stability is achieved on the Korean Peninsula. We can see here at China's doorstep is the US forces in South Korea, okay? And China can expect China to participate more in future dialogues that concerns affairs of the Korean Peninsula. Back in 1953, after the signing of the Armistice Agreement, the United States and South Korea also signed the Mutual Defense Treaty. This treaty commits the two nations, like the Friendship Treaty of North Korea and China, to provide mutual aid if either faces external armed attack. And this treaty also allows the United States to station US military forces in consultation with the South Korean government. And true enough, until now, there are about 20 to 30,000 American soldiers stationed in South Korea. So another factor that led to a change in relations between among the two countries is the conclusion of the Cold War in 1990. China and South Korea normalized their relations and trade started to flourish during this time. To ease the concerns of North Korea over these close relations between China and South Korea, China assured North Korea that it is still its ally in the region. So what happened then, 1990s and until now? Okay. So security and trade relations wise, for North Korea, China still remains the closest friend of China, ally of China. Um, China has supported China all the way, especially during its famine years from 1995 to 1998. And even until now, North Korea is dependent on China in trade and in aid. But trade with China remains stale in comparison with South Korea. For South Korea and China, trade relations have never become better. Okay, so in fact, in 2003, China became South Korea's top trading partner. And in 2019, South Korea was China's third top trade partner, okay, China's fourth largest export market, and China's largest import source country. Specifically in terms of trade value between China and North Korea. In 2009, trade between China and North Korea totaled around 3 billion US dollars. Okay, North Korea exports mineral products too. It imports animal products and textiles from China. In 2020, according to statistics, because of the COVID pandemic, trade between the two countries decreased and it amounted to around 1 billion US dollars. Okay. For South Korea, in 2019, as I mentioned, China was its largest export country. The total trade amounted to about 136 billion US dollars. And China, too, was its largest import source country, amounting to around 107 billion US dollars here, okay? Followed by the United States, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and Vietnam. In 2015, China and South Korea signed the bilateral China-South Korea FTA. And last year, in November 2020, China and South Korea, along with ASEAN countries, signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership in the region. What this means is that China has, since the conclusion of the Cold War, has become a major trading partner of South Korea, and that China has become crucial in the export-oriented economy of South Korea. But peace and stability in the region has not always been the case. In fact, there are challenges that really challenge, or issues and concerns that challenge relations among the three countries. They include the historiography of Goguryeo, the 2016 Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, missile defense system that led to the decrease of Chinese tourists to South Korea, the Korean conglomerate Lotte suffered, and of course, the never-ending issue of nuclear tests or weapons of North Korea. For the historiography of Goguryeo, the Chinese government began its Northeast Asia project. But this project was a controversial research project because it claimed that Goguryeo and other various Korean kingdoms, including Gojoseon, Puyo, and Parhe, to be Chinese tributary states. And when this was published, this sparked really a massive uproar in South Korea when it was published. Also, another issue that concerns the three countries is the deployment of THAAD in South Korea in 2016 under during the Park and administration. This THAAD was originally designed for North Korea to intercept its short and medium range ballistic missiles. But China strongly opposed to this. China said that it threatened its security, it could track its actions. And China was disappointed with this, and that it says it could destroy China-South Korea relations in an instant, to which South Korea argues it has its own decision to decide matters of national security. So this led really to South Korean products to suffer. For example, South Korean products like Hyundai cars, and at the same time trips to South Korea were reduced dramatically. Like for example, March sales of Hyundai and its sister brand Kia Motors in China plunged 52%. And Chinese tourism also dropped to around 40% in 2016. But among the Korean conglomerates that suffered the most was the Lotte. Why Lotte? It was because this conglomerate, or Chaebol, leased its part of its land in Songju to the Korean government for the deployment of the THAAD. And so the Chinese boycotted Lotte stores and other Korean products in China. And this led to tremendous loss for Lotte in China. As for the number of ballistic missiles or the test, North Korea has always had tested its missile tests, especially when Kim Jong-un came to power. As almost every year that missile tests were conducted. And this really upsets the three countries in the region. Okay. From big brother to little brother to equals to enemies or to allies, it depends. This remains to be seen. But for sure, being enemies or becoming enemies would be the last thing on their minds, because there are so many factors that need to be addressed here. One factor is the cultural affinity or the shared history among these three countries. And history plays a very important part of their identity. The other one is people-to-people exchanges, and the other one is extensive trade, and finally peace, which is the best alternative for all of them. Specifically for North Koreans, it is estimated that in 2018, there were around 200,000 North Koreans in China. But these were the legal North Koreans in China. They serve as guest workers in fields such as construction, mining, textile manufacturing, or as workers at North Korea-owned restaurants. And also North Koreans travel to China for educational exchange purposes. Very important matter too is the presence of the chosen job or the Korean Chinese in China. The chosen job or the Koreans are one of the 53 ethnic groups in China. The largest concentration of Koreans is in the Yanbian Korean Autonomous Prefecture in eastern Jilin province, basically in the northeast of China, and they number to about 2 million in China. As for the Chinese dominated the immigration to South Korea, and in 2019, it is estimated that there were around 620,000 Chinese living in South Korea, and they comprise more than half of the entire foreign population in the country. As to peace in the region, South Korea has always wanted peace in the region. And when we say peace, what they wanted really is the denuclearization of North Korea and the reduction of military tensions in the region and the end of war declaration and peace treaty. Because as I mentioned a while ago, the 1953 Armistice Agreement was just an agreement. They are still technically at war with each other. Okay. After saying all this, I would like to conclude 5 points. Okay. First, to me, Korea, or the two Koreas, are little brothers no more of China. These two countries are now equals in the current international system, and they are now capable to make decisions of their own. For the present and in the future, I think that China remains and will remain North Korea's ally. The same is true with South Korea. US remains, and US will continue to remain South Korea's ally. South Korea diversifies and will diversify its economic partners, having learned the painful lesson of Lotte in China, where South Korea realizes that China can can have retaliatory measures against it once its security is threatened. And lastly, being enemies would be the last thing that they all want. The Korean War proved that war or serious military conflicts prove very, very costly at the expense of human lives. And with that, thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Professor Palumbarit, for that very insightful presentation about the history, I guess, of the relationship of China's relationship with the two Koreas, and of course, the potential future direction that their relationship might enter into. Okay. And so with that, we now move to our second speaker, Professor Jaewoo Choo. He is a professor of Chinese foreign policy in the Department of Chinese Studies at Kyung University. He is a graduate of Wesleyan University with a BA in government and a master's and PhD in international relations from Peking University. He is also serving as a director of the China Research Center at the Korea Research Institute for National Strategy. His research interests include Chinese foreign policy, multilateral security cooperation, US-China relations, and China-North Korea relations. His recent publications include US-China relations for Koreans, from Korean War to THAAD conflicts, and the first of its kind in Korea, and US and China strategy on the Korean Peninsula, reading from the facts reading from the facts. He's currently working on book manuscripts on US-North Korea relations and on China-Korea relations. And so again, friends, let us all give Professor Choo a virtual round of applause. Professor Choo, you may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind introduction. That's very generous of you. And I would like to also thank you, the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies, to share my some findings on China's relationship with the Korean Peninsula. Uh, I was given the title, and obviously, Professor Palumbarit uh, gave a wonderful presentation on the historical revolution on the relationship between South Korea and China, as well as North Korea and China. I like to focus more on the contemporary issues, current affairs between China and the two Koreas. Basically, uh, here are some of my talking points. And the first section, I will describe how China is enjoying the moment, meaning that China is very much enjoying the very high tide in the relationship with Korean counterparts. And second is omnipresent China threat. I would like to look at China threat to South Korea, especially from identity perspective and national security perspective, and uh, perhaps uh, what was the third one? Excuse me. Yes, to South Korea's values. And from national security perspective, I like to present a little concern over China's maritime strategy in our waters and how it's going to affect our national security interests. And as a concluding part of China's policy towards the two Koreas, I'd like to examine and present my findings on China's end goals in this region. And I'd like to share some of my concluding remarks with you at the end. Mm. Yeah, I said China is enjoying the moment very much as of now because China has been long seeking for having two Koreas under its control. That is for the stability and peace in the Korean Peninsula. And that is one of the ultimate goals that China would like to achieve in this region. And unfortunately, just like uh, Professor Palumbarit pointed out, with that issue and North Korea's continuing nuclear test, obviously China had no other choice but to impose sanctions on both Koreas. And it is an unprecedented case since the division of the Korean Peninsula. Believe it or not, in the history of China and Korea relations, since the founding of the PRC in 1949, there's not been a moment that China has imposed sanctions on both Koreas. I think this is really critical. It shows that China is now can impose or exert influence over the two Koreas at its own discretion and will. Um, and North Korea, obviously, still, despite continuing its nuclear test, uh, South Korea still hosting the THAAD since 2016. And for these two reasons, obviously, China has to uh, join the United Nations-led sanctions on North Korea. And as a result of the deployment of THAAD, it has also imposed some limited sanctions on South Korea. Uh, and obviously, China in 2018, to be exact, March 8th of 2018, came out with the new solution to the denuclearization of North Korea. It was dubbed in double suspension and dual track approach of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And if you look at the contents of these two ideas, they conform those that North Korea has been insisting over the years. Double suspension meaning that suspension of U.S. South Korea joint military exercises, while North Korea also suspend its nuclear test and missile test. Dual track approach means that while the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula will be pursued, at the same time, building of a the Korean Peninsula peace system will be also in pursuit. The ultimate goal of the dual track approach, if you look at it from especially the perspective of permanent peace settlement of the Korean Peninsula, the implicit goal includes driving out United States forces in Korea, as well as South Korea and the United States alliance. So here we can see how consistent it is with China's idea of dual track approach and North Korea's insistence on the way of denuclearization and its conditions. And China is enjoying the moment again, especially since 2005, as a means to seize the opportunity to have greater influence over North Korea. We define the bilateral relationship as a valuable common asset, meaning that China, while it appreciates the strategic value of North Korea. It also wants to tie the knot with North Korea, as in terms of value of a common asset. And also, China also extended the so-called three no's to respective Korea. Actually, one of the three no's uh, that came from South Korea, while in recent years, China extended uh, the other three no's to North Korea. Uh, the three no's that China extended to North Korea happened in 2018. That was actually at the third meeting between Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping. At the meeting, Xi Jinping said there's not going to be a change in China's position toward North Korea. And that position is unwavering support to the development and consolidation of the bilateral relationship between the two countries, China's friendship to North Korea, and support to a socialist North Korea. So basically, China is saying that North Korea, we are in this together, and our relationship is not going to change under any circumstances. And recently, also in June of 2019, that's when Xi Jinping visited Pyongyang. And he emphasized by his visit, China and North Korea relationship is opening up a new phase in their relationship. And this phase is comprised of so-called three new phases. The first one is by strengthening strategic dialogue and learning from each other's merits. The bilateral relationship will engender new implications. And the second phase is friendly exchanges of personnel and working level cooperation will offer new power to the development of the bilateral relationship. And the third one is communication and dialogue between the two countries and coordination of policy between the two will open up a new chapter to the peace and stability of the region, meaning the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia. However, while it seems like China is very much appreciating its relationship with North Korea, and it looks as if it wants to really strengthen its relationship with North Korea to the extent that it wants to keep North Korea on their swing. However, South Korea is a different story. Because of the THAAD and with hopes to lift the sanctions of China, as well as to materialize Xi Jinping's reciprocal visit to South Korea, it was South Korea that gave three no's regarding THAAD to China. The so-called three no's that South Korea gave to China in 2017 was no additional deployment of THAAD, no joining of US-led missile defense system, and no alliance with the United States and Japan. However, to date, obviously South Korea hasn't been able to meet any of these conditions that it presented to China, and this is what really upset China and Xi Jinping. Obviously, the additional deployment of THAAD is already happening, and by hosting the THAAD per se, South Korea has already joined the US-led missile defense system. The THAAD system is part of the US missile defense system here. And the only condition that hasn't happened is our alliance with the United States and Japan, but the United States, obviously, under Biden administration, is pushing towards this end, and we'll have to see where it's going to be led to. And omnipresent China threat. I said omnipresent because China threat is coming from all different angles. And I think the most accountable factor is geography because we're located so close to China. We're situated in the heart of the, China's first island chain waters. You look at the, nine dash line or, first island chain uh, in defense of Chinese water strategy. We can see there's no other country that is included in this in this waters. Japan is excluded, Philippines is excluded, Indonesia, Malaysia are excluded, and so are some of the Indo-China Peninsula countries are also excluded. You know, I think we can get 80% of the answers for international strategy of a country by just looking at the map, uh, and obviously, uh, the United States alliance and allies are countries that are either islands or peninsula countries. So that's why the navigation of freedom is really critical to the maritime strategy of the United States, because island hopping strategy is really critical to their defense of their national security interest in this region. Here, in 2013, air defense identification zones was called for by China first, and the next day, South Korea also responded in the same manner, while Japan's air defense identification zone was already in place for a long time. And we can see along the East China Sea area, you can see some overlapping gray zones here. But regardless, despite our announcement and definition of our own air defense identification zones, China has been really intruding the zone in much more higher frequency, as well as the extent of extrusion has been really deep into our own sovereignty of the territory. So just like I said, Korea is the lone country situated within the China's first island chain waters. And just like I said earlier, I like to look at China's threat to South Korea from three different perspectives. One is identity. It's like Professor Palumbarit pointed out earlier. Identity relates to our culture and history. And here I stated as in distortion of our history and culture, but it's rather more serious because China obviously wants to incorporate our identity into that of China's. And the second threat to South Korea is related to South Korea's national security. It's like I pointed out earlier, frequent intrusions into our waters and air. In addition to that, China has also claimed Yellow Sea water to be its own in 2010. And with that, in the process of imposing sanctions on South Korea, it has displayed very much serious diplomatic coercions on South Korea. And China obviously tried to interfere with our national security decision-making process, despite the deployment of that is justified on the grounds that it is to defend ourselves against increasing threat from North Korea's nuclear weapons. and missiles, but China is not bought. They don't care. Uh, they just think that the best way of defending ourselves from the North Korean nuclear weapons threat is to denuclearize North Korea. Well, it's going to take a long time, and we all know that. But in the meantime, we have to defend ourselves, and uh, China just doesn't buy it. And China's threat to our values underlies in its vandalism, violence, and manipulating our open and free society. And I don't know if Professor Palumbarit witnessed some of these incidents that also happen on the campuses of South Korea's colleges. And also some incidents also happened during the Beijing Olympics torch relay in the downtown of Seoul in 2008. And from national security perspectives, I'd like to go a little bit more in details of the Chinese jet fighters intrusions into our air defense identification zones and some of the Chinese intrusions into our waters in recent times. Since 2016 and just right up to the breakout of COVID, there has been approximately 450 cases that China's jet fighter has intruded our air defense identification zones. And in the year 2020, aircraft carriers Liaoning and Shandong exercised 20 times in the waters under Korea's jurisdiction. And in addition to other military exercises, that was also carried over 10 times in the same period. In December 2020, that is the most recent intrusion by the Chinese naval vessel. Northern Limited Line, which is located far out on the west of Seoul. The line is not respected by North Korea, and the case shows that China does not respect it either. So basically, China and North Korea are also on the same page on this. And they sailed up to 40 kilometers of the farthest western island of South Korea, Pyongyang, and obviously Chinese naval vessel was spotted there. In summary, look at all the military actions taken by the Chinese military in recent times with respect to the Korean Peninsula. China has been obviously ignoring international norms and rules, as in air defense identification zone, and obviously it shows no respect to institution on the grounds that it is not an international law. And I think this is quite serious attitude by China. And China has been justifying all its military actions under its on the grounds of its maritime scheme. Obviously, China's maritime scheme was the outline of the maritime scheme was presented in two successive years in 1896 and 1986 and 1987. Back then, Admiral Yu Hua-ching, he's like Chinese Mahan in China's maritime strategy. He delivered a couple of speeches, and that speeches basically presented a vision for China's naval strategy and became the foundation of China's maritime strategy. Says to defend the Chinese inshore waters, China must give a definition of its inshore waters. And by its definition, it extends from South China Sea, southern waters of Taiwan to Bohai and Yellow Sea and East China Sea. And he further went on the next year by defining China's intermediate range waters. And that includes waters that are in the range of 200 and 600 nautical miles. And this is a vast area of waters. And he obviously divided them into three sections of defense: the north, the south, the middle. The north waters include South Korea's East Sea, which is also known as, Sea of Japan. So basically, we can look at it: Korean Peninsula, Yellow Sea, South Sea, and East Sea are all viewed as waters of China by the Chinese maritime strategy scheme. Obviously, China's ultimate goal to extend the defense areas of the waters around its neighboring regions is to really secure the passage right to the Pacific Oceans. If we look at the map again, China can only get access through four channels on its way to the Pacific. One is the Philippine Strait, the Taiwan Strait. The other is Korea Strait, and another one is so-called Soya Strait up in northern area of Japan in Hokkaido region. La Perouse is a English name, and to really secure control of the waters, China has also laid out these two military schemes. One is for the peacetime, the other is for wartime. In the peacetime, the goal is to secure the right to manage and control the waters. During the wartime, it seeks the right to counterattack, and that counterattack measure includes nuclear weapons counterattack. China's end goal, really make the Korean Peninsula serviceable to its own interests. Obviously, China has been emphasizing since the opening of the country and reform period that China's neighboring regions and countries should be really stable and peaceful, so that it can really give China an environment in which environment that is really conducive to its own development. And the ultimate goal is to drive out United States forces in Korea, and obviously RK and US alliance. And here's one interesting point that I like to mention is China, uh, in some cases, no, not all the case, not in some cases, but all the cases uh, that China had a similar goal is, in breaking up the alliance of the United States in this region. China was able to achieve this goal in Taiwan in 1979 as a result of the US-China normalization, and in Vietnam as a result of the end of the Vietnam War in 1975. South Vietnam had to, as a result of its defeat, U.S. forces in Vietnam were driven out, and South Vietnam and U.S. alliance broke up. And obviously, the last case is not by anybody's will, and I don't think there was any intention on the part of the United States or China, but the Philippines was another outstanding case here in 1991 when you had a people's vote, referendum vote on the alliance with the United States. And obviously, United States alliance remains only in two countries. One is in Korea, and the other is Japan. But China doesn't mind U.S.-Japan alliance persisting, because they look at it in a very positive terms, because the United States can um, prevent Japan from becoming a normal state as well as a militarized state. And China, on the unification question of the Korean Peninsula, while it emphasizes to South Korea that an independent and autonomous unification by the Korean people without foreign intervention or interference will be supported, but this message doesn't say too much. But on the other hand, since 1980, China has been whispering to North Korea that it supports only North Korea-led unification scheme. So obviously, China is giving out, two different messages to two different Koreas, conveying, two different positions of China's on the question of unification. To Pyongyang, obviously, it has already made it explicit that it fully supports the North Korea's position and adherence to its own scheme when it comes to unification. So basically, here we can see China's end goal is, at least for the moment, is first and foremost to prevent itself from losing Pyongyang if unification is not going to happen. And uh, from the ongoing dialogue between North Korea and the United States or inter-Korean dialogue, it does not want to see Pyongyang from drifting away or drifting too far away and getting closer to the United States or South Korea, or by getting washed away. Hmm. So here are my concluding remarks. China obviously, prefers the status quo on the Korean Peninsula. It wants the Korean Peninsula divided, uh, and as a means to control both Koreas, we can see obviously from the South Korean perspective that China's coercive measures and actions are becoming a threat to the interest of South Korea. And to a degree, it is affecting the bilateral relationship. And obviously, China has made it really obvious that it only supports North Korean-led unification. So I think it has a great strategic implications here. It won't remain idle in case of North Korean contingency. So in other words, China is going to intervene. And the end goal is China wants to remain in control of both Korea and keep both Koreas under control. It'll become much happier when the USFK and US South Korea alliance are gone in this region. Um, so basically, while China seems to really support and giving hands to US and North Korea dialogue and inter-Korean dialogue, but on the other side, it actually worries about the consequences of North Korea's rapprochement with the United States because it's going to totally change the strategic game on the Korean Peninsula, not only for the United States and South Korea, but also for China. And I don't know if China is ready for this yet. Mm. To us, definitely, the consequences is unification. But whether China can really bear the consequence of unification, that'll be under democracy, freedom, human rights, and basically a unified democratic Korea that is adjacent to its border. Thank you very much. That'll be all. We'll appreciate your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chu. Professor Chu, could you there
Yeah,
in
I did.
the screen share? Okay, so again, thank you, Professor Chu, for sharing your insights regarding the very critical nature of the relationship between the two Koreas and of course China. So now we will now open the floor for our participants to ask their questions. So again, just as a reminder, we will be using the chat feature for this. And please again remember that when doing so, please indicate your name and your institutional affiliation. Okay. So maybe we'll start with a few preliminary questions, right? So maybe we could start with a question for Professor Palumbarit. So Professor, how exactly how exactly does the relationship between China and the two Koreas impact the Philippines? And maybe even we could further this into a regional perspective.
Okay, thank you, EJ. It's a difficult question, but I think China has, as we can see, it has also territorial issues with Korea. I pointed out a while ago the Korean historiography, where China implied that that part of Korea belonged to it. But to me, it seems that China would want to deal these territorial issues separately, bilaterally. And so what Korea can do here, I think, is through ASEAN plus three, where it can support, dialogues on peaceful resolution of this matter or matters. But to condemn China of its territorial issues with others, that includes the Philippine Sea and China, perhaps it won't do so. Because when it comes to threats to China's security, Korea knows how China would retaliate in this. So the thing is that bilaterally, China would deal with these issues, and at the same time, Korea can support really peaceful dialogues, the dialogues and peaceful resolution of this matter or matters. Yeah, that's
Okay.
all I can say.
Okay, so maybe we could extend the question, no, to Professor Chu, your thoughts with regards to the regional implication of the relationship between China and the two Koreas.
Hmm. Yes, just like I said, China would like to see both Koreas under its control, and in the due course, obviously, it's going to cause some conflicts, not only between China and North Korea, but also because of South Korea's relationship with the United States and our alliance relationship in particular. So, as we have seen over the years, uh, I think China's tactical moves has been really quite effective here because by imposing sanctions on South Korea as a result of the deployment of the THAAD, obviously it has to a certain extent that it actually intervened in the not only our decision making process, but also had an influence over our relationship with the United States. And since then, South Korea has been really conscious of the China factor. And China factor is going to constrain very much on our strategic thinking as well as our behavior. And as a result, South Korea and North Korea will have to be really conscious of China factor here. And I think it's going to affect uh, the regional international affairs as a result of that. Uh, I don't know if I really answered that. Uh, Hope it helps.
Okay, so maybe here there's also a question on what are the differences on how China deals diplomatically with the two Koreas? Any or both speakers may wish to answer this.
To me, we can see that China's main relations with South Korea is basically commercial interest, and for North Korea, it's security interest. Relations that have been cemented by the so-called blood. So, in that sense, China deals with both Koreas differently.
Okay. What else are the questions here? Maybe this one is something that Professor Choo might have a bit more insight into, no? Does the DPRK actually have a succession plan?
Oh, I don't think they do as of now because obviously Kim Jong Un is in uh, solid control of the nation and the leadership, and unless his health becomes an issue here, I don't think there's going to be a succession plan that is coming out immediately or in short terms. So we can say, Kim Jong Un is going to be in power for some time, and I think his children are too young uh, to be in consideration of a succession as in part of succession plan. Mm.
Okay. Um, and then here, maybe this is something that both our speakers would be interested in answering. What is the likelihood of Korean reunification by 2045? And by extension, what will China's role be in recognizing this? Can we start with Professor Palumbarit maybe this time?
Okay. The way I see it, nobody predicted the fall of the Berlin Wall, 1989. The same is true with North and South Korea. Maybe it can't wait for 2045 to happen for a reunification to happen. So nobody really knows about this. But for sure, at the moment, as Professor Joe would say, and I would agree, the status quo is the best option for now. So for me, nobody knows when it's going to happen. Sooner or later, I really don't have idea about it.
Professor Chu, any insights on this question?
Yes, I mean, as a Korean, I don't think anybody will oppose the idea of unification, but whether it's going to be feasible or practical, who knows? I don't think it can be materialized in what year 2045? That's like what 20 some years away, less than a generation away. I don't think so because Kim Jong Un is still going to remain in power unless his health is deteriorates extensively. So as long as the Kim family remains in power, I don't think there's any chance of unification before his 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 family are are basically gone. Yes, I think the regime itself is a very much big obstacle to the unification.
Okay. So with that, I think we could go to another question. Um, how can China facilitate the peace talks that the Moon Jae-in admin started?
Uh, you mean China?
Yes. How can China help in facilitating the peace talks?
Oh, uh, I don't think it'll be China that could facilitate the peace talks here, but rather when China gets a extraordinary pressure from the United States, then they can facilitate the peace talks. I mean, that has been the history since 1990, since the 1990s, when the first North Korean nuclear crisis broke out. China has remained really passive when it becomes dealing with North Korea or expect meeting the demands and expectation of the international community regarding its influence over North Korea. So unless there's a really heavy pressure coming from Washington on Beijing. For instance, when the United States considers of preemptive strikes or economic sanctions on North Korea, then it'll make China to go along with the United States in uh, facilitating peace talks. Also, extending some influence over North Korea and inducing North Korea to the dialogue or peace talks table. That has been the case in the past. So my take is China still remains passive, and unless there's a heavy pressure coming from the United States, it won't take the initiative. Thank you.
Okay. Professor Palumbarit?
I agree with that. Participate, as I pointed out a while ago. We would see China participate in dialogues on the peaceful resolution in the Korean Peninsula, yeah, in the future as well. So yeah, that's my take on it too.
Okay. And then next, how long do you think will it take for the North-South conflict to actually resolve? And what will it take for China to potentially, unite the two Koreas together?
How long, EJ, can you please repeat
Um,
that?
how long might it take for the North-South conflict to actually resolve itself? And what will it take for China, and maybe even perhaps other external powers, to unite the two
Mm.
Koreas?
Um, we really don't know how long this will take because it depends on certain factors. This is not the issue just between North and South Korea, but there are other actors involved: Japan, US, China. So it depends on certain factors, But as to the length of how, when, and this will be resolved, we don't know for sure. As long as the nuclear weapons threat is there, conflicts, I think, will rise from time to time. So there is no definite answer on how long this will be resolved.
Okay. Um, and then we have a question here for both speakers. What aspects in the dynamics surrounding the issue on Korean reunification would China be most concerned about? Professor Choo, maybe we could start. Professor Choo?
Uh, Perhaps the connection is not good.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so maybe I can answer first while he's fixing
Okay.
it all the way there. I think the very issue here that China would be concerned about is the unification of both Koreas under South Korea, and of course China doesn't want that. Um, that for if there would be reunification uh, South under South Korean leadership, that means a threat to China's national security. Um, For now, what I see is China would want to contain the United States at its doorstep. And reunification means that a stronger US presence in the region. And China wouldn't want US in only until at the doorstep. So security-wise, China would be greatly threatened by this.
Okay. Professor Choo, are you there? Okay, I think we are unfortunately unable to contact Professor Chu at 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 the time being. So maybe we could move to a few more questions. Um, so here's a question: to what degree is China's sanctions on North Korea and South Korea a reflection of China's one foot in and one foot out approach to international norms?
I think
I think
Professor Ju could answer that. He mentioned about the sanctions, but along this, along the line of his thought, I think that China wanted to control both Koreas. For South Korea, that's in terms of trade, and for North Korea, in terms of, let's say, trade sanctions as well. Um, so in this case, what matters most really is China's interest in this case, security, and at the same time, trade interest in the region.
I see. I see. Um, I wonder if Professor Chu will be able to join us shortly. Um, what else? We have other questions here on how do you think China would react to South Korea's plan to develop its indigenous Iron Dome, which is a missile defense system, given that it was proposed by the Korean government in response to North Korea's nuclear threats? This is
Uh,
for both speakers.
um, I, I can only assume that China wouldn't want this. Um, and also, if Korea would develop it, North Korea would be threatened. The region would be peace in the region would be threatened, and I'm afraid that it would be a showdown of this missile defense system in the region. For sure, U.S. and China would oppose to this, particularly China in this regard.
Okay, so I think I could include a question here. So how does the existence, say, of this conflict between the two Koreas, in a sense, complicates, China's capacity towards maintaining better relations around the region?
How
How
does the two
does this conflict between the two Koreas, right, complicate China's capacity to build better relations around the region, say with Japan, of course South Korea, and to an extent, right, countries around Southeast Asia, so on, so on.
Mhm. That's an interesting question. Um, Again, it all boils down to interest for China. For South Korea, there's not much of a problem when it comes to its commercial, relations. The problem is really with North Korea in this regard, because what the U.S., Japan, and most countries want really is the denuclearization of North Korea, to which China is really passive, in dealing with. And so, in as much as China wants to have better relations economically with other countries in the region, it is somehow, to some extent, how would you say this, refrained by the North Korean factor. But at the same time, China has to have really leverage here in this part of the region, because um, it's the line, that connects to North Korea in this regard, and North Korea is very much crucial to its security. So China as well has to balance how it deals with other countries, and at the same time how it deals with both, with both countries here. But China has been clear about that. It has been the closest ally of North Korea. It wants North Korea to economically develop as well. But in terms of security, China will always, stand with North Korea in this regard. But at the same time, it also wants a prosperous China, and that dealings commercially with other countries, particularly Asian countries, is also beneficial to it. Yeah.
I think Professor
Is he
Chu is
back?
having certain connection issues now. So maybe we could just proceed to a few questions. So maybe in light of recent events, no, especially since China's just, or rather, the Communist Party recently just celebrated its 100th year anniversary. Are there signs of appreciation coming from North Korea to finally, follow through with China's recommendation of following the same development path?
Well, North Korea has always been on the side of China. But we can see that when Kim Jong-un took power, his policy differed from that of his father and grandfather. That is the Byungjin policy. Um, it's simultaneous progress, literally speaking. So Kim Jong-un wanted to have the nuclear power capability, weapons, but at the same time, it wants also to develop economically. And that, to some extent, Kim Jong-un is trying its best to provide for its people, and it's looking into China and even Vietnam as an economic model in this sense. So I can only surmise that there might be some economic changes, changes in economic policies when it comes to North Korea. Opening up the country a little bit can be a possibility in the near future when it comes to trade with China further.
Okay. Maybe we could. I hope that Professor Chu is here. Is he here already? um, I hope that he can answer or respond to
I hope so
us.
too.
Professor Chu, are you there? Oh, he's still having a bit of trouble with his connection. Okay, so
Mm.
okay,
I'm left alone here, but I'll try to
yeah,
answer the best I
yeah,
can, EG.
yeah. Thank
I'll
you,
try my
thank
best.
you.
No worries.
So okay, so maybe we'll just go through a few other questions. No, I think we have a very interesting question here about COVID.
Mhm.
And the question is concerned with how can the two Koreas use the COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity for them? I mean, if reunification is a difficult task, no, or is a tall order, how can it, in a sense, decrease tensions?
Yeah, COVID-19. Korea has been handling, South Korea particularly has been handling the COVID pandemic quite well compared to North Korea. In fact, there's recent news say that Kim Jong Un chided, his as his officials in mishandling, the
Mhm.
COVID-19 in the country. In this regard, South Korea can contribute, can help in a way by reaching out to North Korea in this sense as regards to vaccines or help, in dealing with this problem. But what I research is that North Korea is hesitant to accept help, when it comes to vaccines in dealing with this pandemic, especially if vaccines are made in the USA, Pfizer, these things, they won't
Yeah.
accept it. So that's a challenge for South Korea. So in this time of pandemic, I think South Korea can help, but it depends on the willingness of North Korea to engage the South. If it is willing to accept help from its brother. But it all depends. But this is, I think, a very good opportunity for them to set aside, nuclear conflicts, and at the same time, focus on what matters the most now, because obviously North Korea is affected by this too.
And maybe just to prod further, no, has China's vaccine diplomacy been working in either of the two Koreas? Because we don't really hear news about
Yes, yes.
vaccine diplomacy, let's say in South or more so North Korea. So I wonder if you have word about that, Professor.
For North Korea, I don't know, probably because it's made in China, I know back. But for South Korea, to my knowledge, they don't use the vaccine. They prefer Moderna or Pfizer, and they don't take. I heard Sinovac vaccines in the country. That's what I heard.
Is it an official state policy or more of preference of people?
I think it's not an official policy, but I think it's more of reference from people, from friends I know. When I asked them about the Sinovac vaccine, they said, "Oh, we don't use them here."
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, that's what I learned from them.
Okay. Okay. And then next, maybe this is a question that, although it can be answered by both speakers, no, but maybe Professor Palumbarit would have an edge on this, no, if you would. And it's that Duterte has become increasingly critical of North Korean belligerence, but at the same time, still highly supportive, no, of a Chinese policy towards the Korean Peninsula. Do you think that this approach is wise and, in a sense, even sustainable?
What approach? Uh,
The supposed, I guess, dual standard, if you would know, by being critical towards North Korean belligerents, but still supportive of China's policy toward the Korean Peninsula. And I guess by that, it's that China continues to be relatively supportive, no, of North Korean efforts.
so the question of whether this one is sustainable or acceptable or logical or reasonable, well, he can comment on this as he wants, but of course, the international community condemns, the belligerence of North Korea, and I think what the Philippines really hope and wants is peace in the region. Um, Denuclearization has always been on the table, and no matter what they say, we all want really peace and stability in the region. So I don't have further comments on that, but anyone is entitled to their opinion. But at the end of the day, I always believe that what we want is a stable and peaceful, Northeast Asian region.
Of course, of course. Um, Again, I would like to ask if Professor Choo is back.
I hope it,
uh,
but he said here in the chat that he has difficulties in
yes,
connectivity
yes,
issue.
yes. So I hope we are, but unfortunately, it's very external to us. So
Okay.
on our end, it's actually very difficult to resolve this type of problem. Okay. So if ever, Professor Chu, if you are able, you could type down your responses, no, to maybe some of the questions, and then from there, I'll be able to read them. No? So there. What else are the other questions here? Um, Actually, there's this interesting because there's a comment about Russia, no? I guess because we are on the topic of China-Korean Peninsula relations, is there any hope or feasibility for the continuance of the six-party talks? No? I guess, of course, this is for both speakers. Again, Professor Choo, if you could hear us and if you are having connectivity problems, you could type down your response in our chat box. So there. Yeah. Okay. Professor Chu will respond via email. Okay. I will have to send the questions and maybe I wonder if we could do it simultaneously right now, but that would be a bit challenging. Um, I think this is the first time that we have encountered this type of a a webinar concern. So maybe Professor Palumbarit, we could proceed with that question regarding the six-party talks. No? Um, like, what is the feasibility of it even resuming?
I cannot say, but all I can say is that it's not possible for now. Um, though, it depends on the administrations in South Korea, particularly in the US. But for now, there has been no talks yet about six-party talks. Um, all I observe is that communications are between the U.S., China, South Korea in this regard, probably in the near future. But for now, it's not feasible the way I see it. But who knows? They will come again and talk about it.
But were there any merits or shortcomings of the six-party talks when it was happening?
Yes, they wouldn't agree on certain terms in this regard. Like, for example, the promises and that were discussed in the talks. And so administration change and they have this differences in policies towards North Korea. And that's also something that needs to be considered. But in the future, we really don't know. It depends on the Biden administration. It depends on China. But for now, all I can see is that the talks are confined within South Korea and the US and China in this regard.
Okay. So I think we have a question here for Professor Palumbarit specifically. No, um, what aspect of Korea is being talked about in Filipino discourse? Um, and what do academics like to talk about when it comes to Korea? Actually, it's a whole host of different questions coming from Professor Songmo Kang. No?
Uh-huh. I see.
So maybe you could answer. I mean, they are in the chat box, so it's a
Yes,
bit
I
detailed,
can.
no? So
Yes.
if you
What
could
we talk
respond
about,
to.
what would the academics like to talk about when it comes to Korea? I cannot say for all academics, but in my experience, as a professor teaching Korea Studies at the Asian Center, my students would love to talk about, obviously, the Hallyu. And then they are more interested into North Korea. They wanted to learn more about the regime and their unification aspect. You know, but when it comes to Korea, as I mentioned, it's about Hallyu and its impact also on North Korea, and at the same time, the economic development of Korea, the socioeconomic development of Korea, particularly the Miracle in the Hand during the Park Chung-hee administration. They're very much interested, about that. They wanted to know, Korea from a very poor country, a war-torn country in the 1950s, to becoming like this, one of the largest economies in the world. And so they're interested to talking about that, researching about that, based on my experience here at Asian Center. For in newspapers, I have seen a lot of Hallyu, Hallyu and news about Hallyu. The products, the stars. You can see them everywhere in newspapers. Okay, so but point is, in the academe at the Asian Center, based on my experience teaching students, again, it's more about Hallyu, South Korea's economic development, particularly the Miracle in the Hand, and North Korea regime, okay, the Kim dynasty in North Korea, reunification, and the possibilities of North Korea, opening up to the world. So these are the topics and issues that mostly students are interested in, based on my experience.
Okay.
Is he
We
back?
have. I think he's still having Wi-Fi connections or internet problems. What else? Yeah. Actually, are there any other questions regarding China-Korea relations or extensions of that topic?
I think, EJ, there are
There,
some questions
there,
here.
there's a yeah. Regarding Japan's Deputy PM Taro Aso said that Japan must defend Taiwan with the US. What would be the impact of such if it becomes a formal policy on the ROK or the Republic of Korea's stand on the issue? And what futures could be possible between ROK PROC relations with a more emboldened Japan?
Oh, that will certainly create a conflict in the region. Okay? That has been a sensitive issue with China for so long. And, China wouldn't like it in this regard. Um, Japan would be opening up a lot of old wounds, so they say here. I don't think for now. Of course, as part of the U.S. Alliance, Japan has this tendency to support, in defending Taiwan, whatever happens. But for now, the way I see it, it's not really a good time to do this, because it eventually would create really conflicts in the region. China wouldn't like this. South Korea would be dragged into this, especially when it comes to its relations with China, commercial relations with China, and Japan would create, conflict with China in this regard. So I think for now, um, that is just, possibility, but into a reality that can create really conflicts in the region, especially with South Korea, China, and Japan.
Okay. And then we have a question here: as massive centers of technology, how has the political economy of China and Korea affected the IT industry?
Can you say it again? Is
As
it
massive, yeah, it's here. As massive centers of technology, how has the political economy of China, Korea affected the IT industry?
massive centers of technology? How has the political economy of China, Korea? Uh, Korea, China has always looked at South Korea as as a model for its economic development, and that includes IT industry. Okay, so China is learning a lot from Korea, and that is one of the reasons for the warming up of relations in the 1980s, because China would love to learn from the Korean model. How can it affect the IT industry between the two countries? Um, uh, Pretty much so. How can I say this? If relations between the two countries, when it comes to trade and security, continue to be peaceful, I think both countries can benefit on this. Okay. Um, Relations will become warmer in terms of security and trade, and I think both can really benefit from this IT development in China as well.
Okay. I think we have a response from Professor Choo, just being forwarded to us. Regarding the question of Iron Dome issue, Professor Choo's response is that regarding the Iron Dome, if it were for our own defense purpose, the Chinese would have little say to this. The Iron Dome does not much affect much of Chinese security. And with regard to the question on what aspect in the dynamics surrounding the issue on Korean reunification would China be most concerned about, Professor Chu's response is that China would be most concerned with unification and scent of a clear end state vision regarding USFK and ROK US alliance. The Chinese wants a definite answer to this. Okay, so those are some of Professor Chu's responses. And then we have a question here. Has there been instances of China-South Korea cooperation when it comes to tensions regarding Japan, such as territorial disputes and, of course, the more commonly shared historical issues? Have they cooperated before on those matters?
None that I know of, but both reacted. China and South Korea reacted strongly with regards to historical issues. Like, for example, the comfort of women issue, the annexation of Japan by Korea for almost 35 years, and the expectations of Japanese colonization in China. None that I know of, but when it comes to this is a very sensitive issue to the three countries actually. These issues pop up from time to time, but to me, in my observation, China and South Korea react to this very, very strongly.
So maybe if we could push this question further, given these tensions which you have said do come and go every once in a while, no?
Right, right.
Um, does the economic relationship which strongly binds them with each
Mhm.
other actually deter such conflicts, or do they just exist on this separate space?
Economic relations among the three countries are affected really by these issues. Okay,
Okay.
Chinese have boycotted, Japanese and South Korean products, and Japanese products on this, and they are not separate issues. Okay, so these are sensitive issues to China and South Korea. So you cannot separate. That's why I said they pop up from time to time, because um, for one thing, if, for example, commercial relations between the three countries, among the three countries, are good, and suddenly when Japanese Prime Minister visit this Yasukuni shrine, China and South Korea would eventually react on this. Okay, so you can't do away with this issue. Um, so these issues, historical issues particularly, have always, been irritants, shall I say, have always been concerns, cause of concerns in the relations among the three countries. Okay, so there are very sensitive issues to this, especially the Japanese occupation of South Korea and the expectation of China.
Okay. And then, are there any more questions coming from our participants? Okay, so
I think I saw.
is there a question which hasn't been answered yet?
Uh, I think there's a question of how. Oh, no, I think I answered it already. I think there's a question there of how the Philippines can be affected by tensions in North Korea, in the region. How can the
Ah,
Philippines be affected by this?
would you be able to answer that, Professor?
Yes, I think this is an interesting one because it does affect us in some ways. Um, as I mentioned a while ago, the Philippines, we do really want peace and stability in the region. But if there are major conflicts in the region, that's a problem for us too. Um, we will be affected, or going to be affected by this in one way or another. One of which really is should, for example, serious military conflicts or conflict arise in the region, trade can be disrupted in this case. Trade between South Korea, Japan, South Korea, and China will be really very much disrupted in the sense. Another one really is the Filipinos in Korea. There are about 60 to 80,000 Filipinos in Korea, and so their lives will be endangered in this sense. In addition to really commercial relations, I think tourism too would decrease to not only to the Philippines but to ASEAN countries as well. And the thing that I fear the most really is that we can be dragged, into another war. We experienced it in the past during the Korean War, where we sent about 7,000, more than 7,000 Filipino soldiers there, and we wouldn't want to be a part of it anymore. So we will get affected by this, whether we like it or not. And so I think, the ASEAN as well would love to see a stable, situation in North Korea because a serious matter, serious conflict there would be very disastrous for all of us. I think the Korean War proved that to us, and we don't want that to happen again. So whether we like it or not, we will be affected by this. And so that's a good thing, about studying another country, like, for example, Korea, because you not only learn from it, but I think you get to understand that you are part of this, of this, system. Okay, so I think that's my answer to that, Inji.
Okay. But maybe since you highlighted the potential impacts on, say, the Philippines and, broadly speaking, maybe even ASEAN. So,
Mm,
what perhaps is the role of middle powers like us, like say ASEAN, in helping manage tensions in the Korean
mm,
Peninsula? Maybe in coordination with the bigger powers, but but
mm.
but in a sense, in our small way, what can we do?
What can we do to help, stabilize or maintain peace and stability in the region? Um, North Korea is part of the ASEAN Regional Forum, and ASEAN also has ASEAN plus three, right? So again, the ASEAN, including the Philippines and the three countries, are into peace and stability in the region. And primarily for ASEAN, we want the denuclearization of North Korea, right? So ASEAN can be a very good platform, to host or accommodate, talks from North Korea, from South Korea, from big powers as well, because US also is involved in this. And so ASEAN can play a very good role here. Like, it can be a good platform to accommodate all these talks. And I think, as given its role, somehow I can say it's neutral because it's not in the Northeast Asia. It's in ASEAN, and we are known for the ASEAN way. All these things. I think, to me, North Korea would be more comfortable to talk when it comes to matters in North Korea. And I think in the future, ASEAN can play a very good role here. Maybe not in terms of denuclearization alone, but I think in other matters like environmental issues, in Korea, we can also uh, help in some ways North Korea in this sense by being a neutral platform to host the concerns of North Korea in this regard.
Okay, thank you. Which has always been one of the key points about ASEAN, no?
Mhm.
Being this supposed neutral platform where even conflicted powers, no, get
Mhm.
to have a relatively peaceful conversation. Okay.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
and then I guess here is Professor Chu's response to Professor Banlawi's question when it comes to President Duterte's response earlier. Um, and his response is, quote, yes, it is contradictory, but it won't be a problem for too long because there is going to be a presidential election soon in the Philippines, right? So hopefully there will be a change.
That's interesting.
Okay. Very interesting response. Okay. And
Well,
regarding the question, yes, yes, yeah. Yes, Professor.
no. I don't know who will run as vice president. Okay, the next election. Okay. No,
And then here we have another response regarding the question about China, South Korea working together in response to the history and territorial issues with Japan. And the answer is no, because our concern is different from China's. They are two different natures for the two countries, and China's history problems with Japan is about World War II and war with Japan. So I'm guessing it's that although there is a shared in a sense animosity, no, towards Japan, it does not necessarily mean that it is an area towards cooperation, no, since I think it mentions here that Korea's is more about colonialism, colonial ruling, among others, and thus we are seeing two different narratives playing out. Okay. And here we have another question. What can the Philippines, being the country coordinator for ASEAN-China relations, explore more to enhance the ASEAN plus 3 dialogue with ROK on board?
That's a very interesting question. I think I somehow gave partial answer to that. I think ASEAN also can accommodate, not just the nuclear weapon issues, uh, not just matters of nuclear weapons, or denuclearization of Korea. I think there are issues that need to be addressed as well in North Korea. One thing I can say is environmental degradation, environmental problems in North Korea, helping North Korea to open up economically by, these things. I think these are non-traditional security matters that ASEAN can look into, when it comes to dealing with North Korea. And I think North Korea will be very happy to engage because environmental concerns issues concern them as well. Economic issues concern them as well. And so these non-traditional security matters can be taken up in talks in ASEAN. Okay. Um, After all, North Korea is not just about nuclear weapons and all. It has its people to feed. It has its environment to take care of. And as global citizens, I think we have the responsibility to help North Korea in this regard.
Um, we could, since it's already 11:50, I think
Right.
we can already come to a close with our webinar, no? Um, and so with that, of course, we would like to thank not only our speakers, no, for sharing with us their wisdom and their knowledge and their thoughts, no, regarding China's relationship with the two Koreas, complicated may they be, right? And and so um, with that, thank you again to everyone, and maybe we could just have a few words from a few closing statements from both of our speakers. I have tried to inform Professor Chu about it as well, but maybe just on what is the future of for China and the Korean Peninsula, areas for cooperation, but also potentially competition. So Professor Palumbarit, I guess, will give her closing, and hopefully Professor Chu will be able to send his response before we formally close.
Okay, all I can say is that we are we live in an independent world, and that what happens in North Korea is also in the Korean Peninsula is also our concern. Um, we do hope. I do hope that we, you know, aid, in particularly in North Korea, in this sense, when it comes to helping out its people. But all I can say is that affairs in the Korean Peninsula are very interesting. Studying Korean society, both North Korea and its relations with other Asian countries, it's a very interesting topic. I'm not saying that you have to enroll at Asian Center without taking up Korea or China studies, but the beauty really of studying another country is you get to understand that country and you get to understand yourself as well. So it is both a learning process. It is you learn from them, they learn from you, and it is a good thing to do. So I hope you keep watch on what's happening in the Korean Peninsula. We will be affected by that, whether we like it or not. And the study of that country, that particular part of the region, is an interesting pursuit, personally and career-wise. Okay, so I won't say more. I've said a lot, but thank you very much, Billy, for this opportunity, EJ, and for Tina. Thank you very much for inviting me here. And to all of you, I hope you learned something, and I hope that you will have more questions to ask. Not to me, but to you, and questions that you plan to do as your research projects in the future. Okay? For sure, this can help. Not only yourself, but better the relations of the Philippines with its Northeast Asian friends up there. So with that, AJ, thank you very much for this opportunity. I was left alone, but it's okay. I did try my best. But really, thank you for the opportunity, and I wish you safe. You are all safe and good luck in all your projects or future endeavors. And I have students here, and it's really good to be. It's good to see them here. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so again, thank you to Professors Jaewoo Choo from our guest from Korea, and of course, Professor Michelle Palumbarit, no, from the University of the Philippines. Hopefully, both of our speakers, if not for their responses during the open forum, but also during their respective presentations, were able to give us very important insights regarding the nature of China's relationship with the two Koreas. Okay, so with that, again, we thank everyone for coming. But before we end, I would like to inform everyone to please take the time to answer our post-event evaluation to help us, of course, improve our future webinars. You will be receiving an email for that soon after we close this webinar. Okay, but for now, we hope, and again, on behalf of PAX, we hope that everyone has a wonderful day ahead of them. Please, of course, stay safe and stay well. Thank you. 谢谢大家.
Bye, DJ. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.